Hey everybody, Jason Bermas here, and it is time to get deep in the weeds. We're going to be talking about 9/11 and so much more this week via 1077 WQUD. Speaking of the Quad Cities, I do want to remind people that my good friend Todd McGreevy and his partner Chris, they're a part of Marigold Resources. Now, they are supporting the broadcast, and I want to thank them for that. And if you happen to be buying or selling a business, looking for somebody to cross those T's, dot those I's, help you out, I can vouch for them. Great people. McGreevy has River Cities Reader, who I've written for, and I would also encourage you to go check out right there. I mean, you have somebody who's got a print publication in the alternative media for 3 decades plus. You know how hard that is to do? It's just an impressive feat altogether. Buckle up and get ready to get deep in the weeds.
Deep in the weeds with Jason Bermas.
That's right. It is time for Deep in the Weeds with Jason Bermas, documentary filmmaker. Make sure you check out his show, Making Sense of the Madness, on YouTube TV. And I'm excited for today. We are deep diving now with, of course, 9/11 anniversary coming up here. And Jason's going to be involved in some stuff he's going to tell us about. And also, I just got all kinds of questions. I just watched Loose Change again last week, and for the first time in I don't know how many years. And it still just blows my mind. So let's get the man in charge here, Mr. Jason Bermas. What's going on, Jason?
How are we doing today?
I'm, I was telling you, I'm a little pissed at FEMA because they just came out and were like, 20 years of gains have been erased in 6 months. And no one still, there's no accountability. No, everyone just looks the other way or like turns up the radio when you say anything about North Carolina and their response. And the only reason because they fed us so many manure sandwiches about what was going on down there. And the only reason I really know is because our own DJ, Uncle Tim, took a really big personal interest in this. It went there personally and saw what was going on. Nobody in the media talks about them going around with stakes and popping the ground for cadaver dogs to try and find bodies in the mud. Nobody talks about all the people that were just basically, I don't know, we don't know where they are, or, we didn't go on that mountain pass. Like, there's a lot of bad stuff that happened down there, and everyone's still ignoring it. Even the Trump administration. No one says anything. And that's frustrating.
Yeah.
But I don't want to start, I'm in a good mood. It's Friday. We got a holiday weekend. That's just annoying, man.
I'd say it's a little bit more than annoying. It speaks to not only these third rails in politics, say outside of conservative or liberalism, but it really does speak to the permanent state and the executive within an executive that I often talk about. The Federal Emergency Management Agency has been quite corrupt for some time and really at the core of some of the biggest cover-ups and operations to run cover in history. In fact, we're going to be talking about 9/11 today. The Federal Emergency Management Agency was actually placed in New York City prior to 9/11. They were running several different emergency drills that were going to be taking place that day. On the pier is probably one of the more famous ones. I believe that was the tripod drill. And then some of these drills were actually taking place in the new emergency management center that they had built in Building 7, actually. That was the
old Building 7.
That was the command post. And one of the other functions of FEMA outside of disaster relief and preparedness is mass casualty events. So when we are talking about their preparedness, there are certain facilities. If you do remember events like Katrina, which you mentioned, remember they'll just find a large-scale facility, a football stadium, for instance, and then reinstitute it as an emergency operating center run under FEMA. FEMA really was integral via 9/11 as the cleanup crew. They are the ones that really initiated that. It wasn't really much of a rescue effort, but to haul out the vast majority of the steel from the World Trade Center site, which was absolutely massive. And I would just end on this note with FEMA. Not everybody that works for the Federal Emergency Management Agency is bad. In fact, I would assume most people are trying to do good, or they're there to, just collect a paycheck. I know somebody who recently worked for FEMA, and she was a sweet girl that used to work for me in a video department, but she's kind of one of those, drifter types that always has a new job every 1 or 2 years in a different field, that type of thing. So they keep you off your feet in some instances. But James Bakarsky, who was the head of this drill and one of the leads in FEMA, is quoted in, I believe it was the New York Daily News, just days after the event. And he was talking about the search after the fact and how you really weren't looking for bodies because of the cremation effect and the heat. And he literally talked about temperatures on the site of 2,700 degrees. Okay? Now, Aaron, I know that a lot of people are probably familiar with that meme that went around for many, many years. Jet fuel doesn't melt steel beams. And then you'll get the debunkers talking about how, well, it didn't really have to melt, and they'll cite the NIST report, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What all these people fail to acknowledge is that we're not the ones that came out with the melting of steel beams story. That was the official narrative until later on when they realized that jet fuel indeed never reaches a temperature that could do anything near that. You're talking about burning at 1,500, maybe 1,800 degrees with the right conditions. How do you have these molten-like temperatures? Well, they just denied after the fact that they ever existed. It didn't matter that Bakarsky talked about 2,700 degree temperature. It didn't matter that Pataki and Giuliani on numerous occasions acknowledged that the temperature was over 2,000 plus degrees. It didn't matter that Ken Holden of FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, actually testified that there was molten metal dripping not from the debris of buildings 1, 2, or 7, but actually building 6. That is included in Loose Change Final Cut. And then, of course, you have the NASA thermal imagery, which again demonstrates temperatures of over 2,000 plus degrees, which once more would be physically impossible if this were a jet fuel-based fire.
Well, and that's kind of the heart of Loose Change. For anyone that's never seen Loose Change, especially with the University of 9/11 coming up, I would highly recommend it. What does it for me? I mean, obviously, right out of the gate, you guys, you kind of do this backdrop at the beginning of history through America and some different things that have happened, and which is cool. But all the newscasters talking about these buildings are coming down demolition style, over and over. But what really puts the nail in the coffin, you got the guy from BYU who's talking about the explosive, all the explosive like dust from explosives. So obviously there was explosives. And then there's the mysterious Building 7, which just decided that what was the official ruling on that? Like some fire got into Building 7 somehow, and even though I never saw any smoking or anything like that, and then that came down to demolition style, which had to have been prepared well ahead of time. This is a lob ball for you, man. This is this is a home run for you every time. So please, let's talk about Loose Change. Let's talk about 9/11. Give me what you got.
Well, just because you brought up Building 7, this was a 47-story skyscraper that really would have towered over the majority of skylines within most cities. I mean, think about right here in the Quad Cities going down to downtown Davenport and seeing a 47-story building. I'm not quite sure what the tallest building down here is, but maybe 15 stories. Aaron, I don't know that we hit the 20. Maybe. I think I'm being pretty generous right there. If
the clock tower, maybe.
Yeah, if you looked at, say, the Isle Casino, think of something that is 5 times as high, okay? And this was the Spook House of New York City. For instance, it had the largest Central Intelligence Agency base in the world outside of Langley, Virginia, where they're based out of, to give people an example. The Secret Service also housed there. I already discussed with everybody how the Office of Emergency Management, which had just been revamped, is also there, and that plays into a key aspect of this later on, because that morning, Giuliani and his team were in Building 7, and they were told to leave. Well, there were a couple of people that did not get the memo as they were arriving late amongst the chaos, and those two individuals of significance would be Giuliani's right-hand man. He was the city corporation counsel at the time, Michael Hess, and another individual who worked for the city and emergency management, Barry Jennings. So when they initially get there, they're able to take the elevator up. Now, when they get into the center, although Michael Hess has never talked to me, I did contact his offices, try to get an interview with Michael. We were unable to do so. Dylan Avery, the driving force behind Loose Change, he was able to find Barry Jennings. And so Dylan and I went down to New York City, and we went into Jennings's office, and he had actually seen the second edition of Loose Change, and he was very eager to talk to us, especially about what the official version of Building 7 was at the time, because that would change over the years. You see, essentially, they didn't have to come up with an official version. The NIST report on the demolition, or the non-demolition, if you will, of 1 and 2 did not contain 7. Even the 9/11 Commission never talked about 7. It's not in the 9/11 Commission report whatsoever. Yet Jennings, of course, had been interviewed, because he and Hess, when they went up into that center, it was empty. And it wasn't just empty. The way that Barry described it, he said that the coffee was still hot, so it must have been evacuated, I don't know, maybe within the 20 minutes of them getting there. He said he saw half-eaten sandwiches everywhere. And so him and Hess start talking, and they're like, we better get out of here. We need to leave. So they try to go to the elevators, can't go to the elevators. Elevators don't work anymore. They start taking the stairwell. Now, like I told you, this is a 47-story skyscraper. The Office of Emergency Management is about halfway up at the 23rd floor. So they begin their descent on the stairwell, and Barry describes numerous explosions, hearing explosions all over the place. Obviously, adrenaline's pumping. They're scared. And they get down to the 8th floor, and an explosion happens within the building underneath them. Barry actually describes holding onto a ledge and kind of hanging off an area that had been blown up. So they have to go back up the stairs. They end up knocking out some windows, and that is how we were able to actually find these guys, because they were rescued by the fire department later that afternoon after both towers had gone down, but before Building 7 fell into its own footprint at 5:20. Now, that first official version, and what they told Jennings, was that down in the basement levels, they had large boiler systems, and that these systems that were helping power had blown up, and that's exactly why it went down. That would not be the official version when people pressed the National Institute of Standards and Technologies to actually look at this. Instead, they would talk about the fires and thermal expansion. And through this thermal expansion, somehow, some way, one of the main beams collapses, and magic happens. And a 47-story skyscraper in the middle of Manhattan falls into its own footprint that happens to be the largest spook house out there. And by the way, I mentioned the SEC earlier. That Office of the Securities and Exchange Commission also contained all the Enron documents. Pretty how about that? Amongst many, many other very, very odd things. But the real spooky thing was that after we put the Jennings interview out into the public arena, and you can actually see that in my film, Fabled Enemies, Barry ended up getting upset. I don't think he was ready for all the press that came his way, and he ended up doing a interview with the BBC. The BBC ran this, hit piece on myself and Dylan and Loose Change. And, to their credit, even though Barry changed his story, they allowed Dylan to play on his phone exactly what Barry had said. That anniversary of 9/11, and I believe that was in the 6th anniversary, I was down at New York City at the site of the World Trade Center, and I ran into the BBC journalist. And if you can call him that, I never really liked the guy. And I asked him about Barry Jennings because we had tried to get in touch with him after the fact because we wanted to clear everything up. And I asked him if he had been in touch with him. He said he had not been in touch with him. He was sure everything was fine. I think we found out later that month, if it wasn't in October, it was in November, the latest, that apparently Barry Jennings had died of fast-acting leukemia. Now, that's kind of the end of my story and Barry Jennings, but what I can tell you is that Dylan and Corey really did want to know what happened. They hired a private investigator to look into the matter, and within the week, I believe it was, the private investigator returned their money and told them never to contact him again.
Oh, really?
Correct.
Interesting. We are deep in the weeds with Jason Bermas, brought to you by River City's Reader, and we are, we're in Jason Bermas's home run zone here. Of course, documentary filmmaker from Loose Change, and we are talking about 9/11 with it coming back up. And I mean, there's a lot of things I want to ask you about. I was thinking about this through the week. I'm like, I got to ask about this. I want to ask about this. One of the things that stuck out that I had forgotten about, the people on the planes. Mm-hmm. And number one, you guys kind of go through in detail who the people are. And a ton of them are government workers, or allegedly government workers. The planes are all fairly empty, only about a quarter full, which is very unusual. All 4 of them are that way. And probably the most unbelievable thing is that people are calling from their cell phones from the plane. Now, even today, I don't know that you can call on a cell phone from a plane that's in the air. I've never done it. I've never seen anybody do it or be successful with it. And so and we're talking about, how many years has it been now? 25, 24 years?
Yeah,
right?
it will be the
years?
24th anniversary.
So we're talking about people with flip phones, and they're calling people. They're calling their loved ones.
This is way pre the iPhone era or even the smartphone era.
Right.
I think that you're talking maybe. I don't even know if you're at a BlackBerry point at this point. I think the Razor would have been the hottest thing around if it was even there, and I don't even know if that was around. We're really talking, like you said, clamshells and the little mini Nokia type phones that you would have a ringtone where it wasn't even the song; it was like boo 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 boo. But yeah. I would just say this about the phone calls. There is a lot of suspicious things regarding those phone calls and the science surrounding them. Today, there are definitely some planes that will allow you. They either have towers on them specifically, or just like you can buy Wi-Fi on a plane. Many of the carriers out there, T-Mobile in particular, you can call through Wi-Fi. So those calls, in many cases, are certainly possible today with that technology. However, it certainly is questionable in the late 90s. Of course, back then, and people forget this, there were sometimes phones on the back of the seats in certain areas. So you had actual phones that you could make calls on. Of course, those would be extremely expensive. And you do have phone calls from the planes via the flight attendants and others that utilize those onboard technologies. However, I'd like to go back to your other point on who these guys were. And many of them, whether you believe the retractions or not after the fact, but they had their homes listed on their licenses as U.S. bases and facilities. The New York Times, amongst others, had reported that some of these people had trained at the Defense Language School in California. You had the vice chancellor come out and say that Bush allowed these attacks to happen so that they could get their war in the Middle East. Others did similar things within Florida. You have the al-Bayoumi case, where a couple of these guys were living with and renting from FBI informants, and then you end up having a central intelligence agency angle to all of that. And then, of course, you have Able Danger. And, as I stated, I'm going to be now hosting one of the days of the Turning the Tide 9/11 Justice in 2025 conference in the belly of the beast in Washington, D.C. And the interesting thing there, and what I'm really happy about, is that you not only have current U.S. Senator Ron Johnson there, but you have Curt Weldon there, who was a former U.S. Senator outside of Pennsylvania, and who you can actually see in portions of both Loose Change Final Cut and Fabled Enemies. And that is because Weldon was one of the few individuals to speak out in regards to the hijackers, because he was he was in the upper echelons of Senate intelligence. You really couldn't get much higher than Curt Weldon. And he was privy to a then classified program called Able Danger, in which Anthony Schaefer, Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Schaefer, and others who had been in the heart of spycraft had already identified many of these hijackers and their network prior to 9/11, and were feverishly trying to, quote-unquote, get meetings with the FBI so that they could go over this threat, and they were continuously denied those meetings. So the Able Danger hearings, I believe they happened in about 2004. That is still something that has never been fully declassified. Schaefer and others have spoken out. Weldon had, his office broken into, his family smeared. I was able to interview him last year. So it's going to be a real pleasure to be able to meet some of these people in person. Dennis Kucinich, who is a former U.S. representative and a Democrat, he actually introduced over 30 articles of impeachment of the Bush-Cheney administration, and the last 3 were in regards to 9/11. History doesn't talk about that much. He's going to be speaking there. John Kiriakou, who is the CIA whistleblower that dared to stand up to the lies and say, no, actually, we are torturing people at Guantanamo Bay and others, and we are using waterboarding, and yes, that is torture. That man did prison time. You mentioned the demolition of the towers. You were alluding to Dr. Stephen Jones from BYU. Well, we're going to be having Richard Gage, one of the founders of, I think, the now defunct Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, but he continues to bring light to that darkness, and Richard is just a wonderful individual. On top of that, we have family members that you can see in the film Unspeakable, and that is also done by Dylan, and it is an emotional roller coaster of the fight for family members such as Matt Campbell and Bob McIlvaine, who will also be there to try to get justice for their brother, for their son, and the truth about 9/11 there as well. And then we just got a slew of other people that have been in this game for 2+ decades. And the great thing is, when I was having this conversation last week with somebody that really doesn't know my past, and he's kind of asking me, certain things about what I do. And he's like, well, what happens when you make a prediction that doesn't come true? And, Aaron, we've known each other for a while. I don't really make a ton of predictions, right? And if I do,
you're not really in the prediction business.
Yeah, I'm not that guy. I think that that's a misnomer for people generally in my field, because I am on the microphone and people think that I have to make these wild predictions or whatever. When I speculate, I always let people know, really, my gravy train with biscuit wheels is showing people information that's out there, mostly in the mainstream, either in news articles or videos or white papers, etc.
Very good at sourcing.
Yeah, I think that that's definitely the way to go. That way, you know where my information came from, and then you can decide for yourself. And I said, when I first got into this, I really believed that we were going to get a real investigation into 9/11. We were going to get criminal prosecutions that were going to be successful, figure out what happened, and we were going to take our constitutional republic back. After the 5th anniversary of 9/11, where we really, and now this is almost 20 years ago, this is 19 years ago in a couple weeks, where we had 10,000 people down at the World Trade Center, and the media completely ignored us. And if they didn't ignore us, they smeared us. That morning I had gone on with Dylan against the Popular Mechanics guys on Amy Goodman's show, debated them. I was supposed to go on later versus the same individual on Glenn Beck's show when it was on CNN. We got canceled from that. And really, there was just kind of this unfortunate downward decline after the 5th anniversary of 9/11 in the interest of it, or the possibility that we could do anything. So now we're at a point where there seems to be a resurgence of interest in the topic, especially post-COVID 1984 nightmare, where less and less people believe or trust the mainstream media. And now, we're about to be on the 24th anniversary. Maybe by the 25th, we can get enough momentum. Not that we'll get criminal investigations or indictments or any of that, but more information in the public arena. And really, that's what I've focused on now almost the past 15 or so years, is trying to win in the court of public opinion. And now that you have somebody like Tucker Carlson, for instance, who, he used to attack 9/11 truth rabidly. I remember his segment with David Ray Griffin, who was this academic who had kind of stepped out on a limb when nobody else was talking about the World Trade Center and what had actually happened, and wrote several books on it. Tucker also bashed loose change on air many times, and even probably within his last 2 or 3 year run on Fox News. Well, Tucker Carlson has fully come around, and he announced on X yesterday that beginning on 9/11, he is going to release a 5-episode series on 9/11. And if you want, we can actually play the clip here, and you can hear it. And of course, you can always watch it after the fact on the YouTube. But here it is. And as you can see, if you watch this after the fact, well, it says right out of the gates, the official story of 9/11 is a complete lie. So let's hit that clip.
The official story on 9/11 is a complete lie. The 9/11 report is a joke.
You have the CIA following 2 men all over the planet, and then eventually even to America, right? And you don't tell the FBI. 9/11 Commission to cover it.
So what did happen? What did the government know? What did foreign governments know? There was a cover-up. Why? It's been nearly 25 years. It is time Americans learned what actually happened. We're going to tell you. We're releasing 1 episode per week. You're not going to want to wait. If you're a member, you don't have to. You get all 5 episodes the day it drops, right then, ad-free. Our first episode airs Thursday, 9/11, September 11th. You will not want to miss it. Join us now at tuckercarlson.com.
And I got to tell you, I don't often pay a subscription fee. And, certainly in this realm of independent media where guys like me have to kick and scream and scrape, not only for the funding to do this, but just to get the views on social media, not my thing, but I'm probably going to do it for this one, just to see what's out there, to cover it, to see how he covers it. It looks like he will at least be delving into some of the Israeli aspects of 9/11. And that's the thing. It's easy to get caught up in slogans and hashtags. We talked about jet fuel doesn't melt steel beams, but even 9/11 was an inside job. That is not exactly true. Although there are elements within our own government that were clearly involved in the execution and the cover-up of this. This is an international intelligence operation with role players in Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, the United States, and Israel.
I think the interest and the international aspect is, and I kind of got reminded as there's a little. You guys sprinkle some of that into the final cut, loose change final cut, but I don't know a lot about that per se beyond what you have in the movie. But it's the classic. You see something, it's obvious, and then your government comes over and says, "That's not what happened." Like, "Oh, that kid just jumped off the dock into the lake." No, he didn't. Yeah, he did. I just watched him do it. No, he didn't. That's not what happened. Like, what? And it's almost like pressed to a point where they're like, "No, you're crazy. That kid didn't just jump off the dock. Like, what? You're wacky. There's something wrong with you." And really, they're just lying. And they use the pressure, the big brother type feel of like, "No, you're wrong. Even though with your own eyes you can see, just like all those newscasters, these buildings are coming down in demolition style. Planes have hit buildings before, and they don't come down unless it's demolition style. And obviously, if all that was set up, that took time, right? I mean, you can't just get a building ready for demo in 10 minutes, can you?
Not only can you not get a building like that ready for demo in 10 minutes, when you get into the security aspects of the World Trade Center, and remember, we talked about Building 7 being this ultra spook house. The Central Intelligence Agency, the FBI, the NSA, even back in 2001, all had residents within World Trade Center buildings 1 and 2. Initially, Securicom, which was, I believe it was Bush's cousin who was running that, was in charge of World Trade Center security. And then there's actually an individual out there called John O'Neill. And John O'Neill has this really interesting story. Personally, as far as like his private life, a lot of people like to tear into him because I believe he had 2 families. But kind of
one of those guys.
One of those guys that again, you're in that nebulous intelligence world, and he was part of the FBI, and he was basically in the field office that was part of the Bin Laden unit, and he was extremely worried about Bin Laden and that network attacking the United States, the World Trade Center in particular. He felt like his hands were being tied. So he leaves that job and he becomes the head of World Trade Center security. And he's in that process in the summer before the attacks. You could look at companies like Kroll, and O'Neill ends up dead that day. There's not quite a timeline. I believe he dies or he disappears, if you will, somewhere between the first and second plane strike. And the other really spooky thing about 9/11 that really is not discussed, but if you watch Loose Change Final Cut, we have an interview with one of the firefighters that was in the building that day that survived. And, they go through a process of clearing out rooms while they're in rescue. So that entails going into the room and then opening all of the doors. And he discusses while they were clearing out one room, they opened up a closet and there was a dead body in the closet. What does that tell you? That tells you that there were certain people that were targeted and killed as the event was going on. There were certain people on the inside that knew that those buildings were absolutely coming down. And that evidence is, further reiterated by the stock trading that was going on within the World Trade Center that morning, where you had these bets and these put options put on the very airlines, and those are a bet against that stock, United and American, that would be involved in these hijackings. There was plenty of forensic evidence, despite the, utter devastation of the World Trade Center. You would be shocked what you can get off even a partial hard drive. And a lot of that information, again, pointed to people within the building making trades that they would have had foreknowledge of the attacks on. And yet, we never saw those criminal investigations. We never saw that information in the broader public arena. And it's yet another example of how we've been lied to about 9/11.
Yeah. We are deep in the weeds with Jason Bermas, brought to you by River City's Reader, getting deep into 9/11 as it's coming up on its 24th anniversary. And, of course, talking a lot about Jason being a documentary filmmaker with Loose Change Final Cut. And, man, I don't know. It's, and here's the thing. It did give them their war. I remember I was not a W fan because I felt the way he won the election was crap. It was very obviously, manipulated, in my opinion. And I wasn't a huge Al Gore fan either. I felt like Al Gore was really full of himself. But no one says you have to like either one of them, right? I mean, that's not a rule or anything. But I didn't like W just because he was, he got in with his dad and, pave your own way, bro. You know what I mean? But very much I remember telling the guy I worked for at the time, I didn't want Bush to get in because I felt like he was a warmonger. I knew that they were involved with a lot of defense contractors, his family, and that they were going to get us into a war to make more money. And, they kind of figured out how to do that. But at the same time, they hit a reset button on patriotism in the country. You pull off this massive, again, situation where I see the kid jump in the lake, but you're telling me he didn't jump in the lake, so I don't know. But, they push all of this like, oh, no, these guys in the one plane, they were heroes. They made the plane crash. And, I have a lot of doubts about that. But either way, they spun it around. They wagged the dog, if you will, and spun it around and made it into this patriotic thing. We're going to go after these sons of bitches. We're going to get them, this, that, and the other. And everybody kind of jumped on board, even though we know what we saw wasn't what they told us we saw. That kind of stuff, it just drives me crazy. You'd hate to think anyone would be killed in basically a scheme, which was practiced. Oh, this could happen kind of thing. Wasn't there like that documentation floating around in the FBI, CIA, where they had like this whole practice thing if this were to happen kind of deal?
Well, it's actually worse than that. So initially, the mantra was nobody could have ever foresaw this happening. There were no warnings. Nobody thought they were going to fly planes into buildings, etc. But you go all the way back to the 93 World Trade Center bombing, the arrest of Ramzi Youssef. And even then, they were extremely aware of these people supposedly trying to hijack planes and fly them into buildings. Now, there were a number of hijack exercises prior to 9/11 that mirrored the events. For instance, you had a mass casualty drill where a plane hits the Pentagon. Anybody can type that in, and you will see little black and white photographs of that drill and, plane debris all over the midsection of the Pentagon after crashing into it. There was Operation Amalgam Virgo. Amalgam Virgo is especially eerie because this takes place in August, just before the attacks. Osama bin Laden is on the cover, and amongst the many terrorist scenarios is a commercial aircraft being hijacked out of Alaska and flown into the Capitol building. Now, even more eerie is the fact that a bunch of these drills are happening on the morning of 9/11 as well. You have Vigilant Guardian, you have Northern Vigilance, and you have a number of others that are still classified to this day. If you listen to the NORAD tapes, when the attacks initially commence, the first thing out of the operator's mouth is, wait a minute, is this real world or exercise? Because within, I believe, about 10 to 15 minutes of that first crash, their exercise was also supposed to be having a hijacking going on. Other things that mirrored that day, you had John Fulton of the CIA running a drill of a small plane crashing into a building at 8:46 a.m. Even during the 9/11 Commission hearings, the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and others, Richard Myers, had to admit to fighting, quote unquote, many phantoms that day. And a phantom is essentially a blip on the radar that is not there, and they thought was a hijacked or hostile aircraft. Remember, they were under the assumption that some of these hijacked aircrafts actually had explosives on board. These drills did not end until 20 minutes after the crashing of United 93. And a lot of them were being run out of Cheyenne Mountain underground. It was only through the NORAD tapes that we knew that they continued to run, and they were not shut off until then. I want to go back to your earlier point of, they got their wars. They got so much more than just wars. So, this is one of the reasons that I still think it's valuable to talk about 9/11 to this day. And that is because our entire foreign and domestic policy to this day is based on that official narrative we know to be a lie about 9/11. Whether that is the war in Afghanistan, Iraq, the broader war on terror, what we've done in Syria, what we continue to do in Yemen, the total and complete massive expansion of drone warfare, of automation, robotics, DARPA dogs, different types of weapons that have now become the norm. That's just foreign policy, domestic policy here. Aside from the Military Commissions Act, the National Defense Authorization Act, of course, you have the Patriot Act, but also the creation of the Department of Homeland Security. And I know that ICE is all the rage via the Department of Homeland Security at this moment. But I want to remind people that we had border security prior to Homeland Security, and it only seems like, I don't know, border security amongst everything else has only gotten worse under Homeland Security. Homeland Security also enabled the explosion of these pseudo government agencies, these things called fusion centers. There are a multitude of fusion centers throughout the country that, quote unquote, help local law enforcement talk to the FBI or the CIA or the NSA, et cetera, et cetera. So now you've also privatized a lot of this, and we saw almost the full brunt of that power, noticing that the Department of Homeland Security and these fusion centers, et cetera, when they were talking about terrorism, they weren't talking about the big bad Muslims overseas from Al-Qaeda and ISIS. Who were the targets? Oh, it was American citizens. It was PTA moms. It was people standing up for their own medical rights and personal sovereignty. So literally, we watched the system put in place by a massive lie go after American citizens. And have we dismantled it yet, Aaron? Or have we continued to legitimize it?
I mean, obviously, we've continued to legitimize it, and you do that, then you mix in the old Smith modernization. So now our media is they can legally propagandize everything, and it's a mess, Jason Bermas. It really is. Like, it's so many people I talk to, older folks too, especially, they just shake their head, like, what happened? What happened here? Because everybody can see, the manure sandwich we're being fed on a number of things. And it's just like, well, what good does it do anyway? If we do try to fight it or talk about it or anything like that, people already know. I mean, it's already there. They know, but it's, I don't know, man. How do we change that direction?
Well, I think that, some of the direction has been changed in that the conversation is there in a way that it hasn't been before. I think that's the most positive aspect, right, of this Trump administration, is at least the conversation is out there. And that base does expect more. Now, obviously, I'm a huge proponent of getting the Epstein files out there. One of the things that we haven't discussed today at all is the fact that we have those DOJ tapes from the Ghislaine Maxwell interview, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not super hopeful that we're getting anything major there. But with 9/11, I think that it's even more important because you're getting into things that directly affect our foreign and domestic policy that have literally taken the lives of millions of people over the last 20 plus years, right? And also restricted the freedoms of American citizens here at home. I going back to what I thought when we were younger, when I was a younger guy to now, I hate to be super cynical, but because of the vast array of things that I talk about right now, I just tell people to stay human, right? Transhumanism is one of those things that I'm constantly talking about, and I see so much of this stuff pushing forward. But I would just say this: ignorance isn't bliss, right? You might think it is, but when it comes to the hardcore decisions of, say, whether you want to roll up your sleeve and inject a bioweapon into you and your family, you might want to know how corrupt your government is. That's the basis for this. Would I love to see hearings, indictments, prosecutions? Sure would. Don't know how it happens. I mean, you got to remember that initial 9/11 commission was set up in such a way to cover this up that they actually allowed Dick Cheney and George Bush to testify to that commission. Only certain members, not even all of them. I don't even think they were under oath, but they weren't allowed to tape the conversation. Again, they testified together, and there was no record of it. I mean, that's insane.
That's bizarre.
Yeah. It's a little bit bizarre.
Well, Dick Cheney also shot a guy in the face accidentally. So,
And, he also has an artificial heart, Darth Vader style, I think almost for the past decade. Even, did you watch the Christian Bale Cheney picture?
No, but I would like to see it.
It's not terrible. It's definitely watchable. It probably paints Dick Cheney into a more sympathetic character than I would think. But, one of the... I don't want to spoiler alert. I think the thing's like, almost a decade old at this point.
It's an old movie. If you haven't watched it by now, tough.
Yeah.
It's fine.
But kind of like the driving narrative that's being told is being told by the guy that would give Cheney his initial heart before he became Darth Cheney. Because there's been a couple of different instances where guys like Dick Cheney get that primo medical service that guys like Jason Bermas and Aaron aren't going to get.
Right. So what? Does he have what's his heart? What is that? He's got an artificial heart?
Yeah, you know what? I should pull it up. We should do that one live. Let's see. Cheney's artificial heart. Let's see what it is. And we'll get the history from Google AI. So let's see. Dick Cheney was not initially implanted with a total artificial heart, but rather a left ventricular assist device in 2010. However, in 2012, he received the total artificial heart to replace his diseased heart, a device intended as a temporary solution to keep him alive while he waited for a transplant. So I don't know if he still has that in there. But yeah, no, he got the total artificial heart in March of 2012.
I didn't even know that was a thing.
I mean, for rich people that, have committed massive war crimes throughout the world, yeah, no, it's a thing.
Well, it's no surprises. His first heart wore out. Obviously, it was black anyway.
As black as the night itself, Aaron.
Yeah. No, I didn't even know artificial hearts were a thing. You don't hear about that.
I mean, the LVAD, sometimes referred to as the Cheney pump.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean...
Wow, he got the experimental version, huh?
He gets it all. I mean, it's again, anybody can go look into that. The man, they kept this guy alive without a physical heart. It's just, it sounds science fiction level. It sounds like something literally out of Star Wars, but it's the real deal.
Wow, that's crazy. I had no idea. I didn't know he had a fake heart. I didn't even know fake hearts were a thing. I didn't know they had just full on artificial hearts they could put in people. And obviously, maybe it works better than they thought, because if he hasn't gotten another transplant, he's still working on the, what is he, 12 years in now, or 13 years in?
I think that it was only for, I think that the full artificial heart, if I was reading it correctly, although they don't tell you when it was taken out, it was only in there for several months, and there's something else there at this point. I don't know whether it's a physical one, but that would have been his second heart, like actual physical heart on top of that one. So I'm going to have to claim ignorance on that one. But again, we show our work here. So if you watch this after the fact, you can do your own search, and you can check out all these articles behind me talking about Darth Cheney and his artificial mechanical heart.
That's crazy. Boy, there's a lot of folks with loved ones with bad hearts that sure probably be interested in getting into one of these artificial hearts.
And the technology, again, this is back in 2012. So we're talking about well over a decade for the Predator class and their minions that get this type of tech.
Wow. Man, I wish I need to get richer, I guess.
Don't we all?
Yeah, that sounds good. More money. Man, that's wild. I don't know. I love going deep in the weeds with Jason Bermas every Friday, because every time we do this, I come away with something where I'm like, no kidding. Like, that's crazy. You know, like you teach me something new, or you talk about something I've never heard of before, and I'm like, what? You know, sort of like the moon landing thing. Like the math on that is very eye-opening. You know, it's like every week we get something where I walk away with my eyes wide open, like, holy cow. You know, and I love that. And the fact that you're so well sourced, and you're like, here, go look at this. Here, go look at that. Make your own, you know, that's where it's at, man. You know, just the information. I've had so many people reach out and how much they love this segment that we're doing every Friday. And how can't you? And, you know, it's good stuff. So, I mean, next week, are you going to be able to do it next week?
I will be here through. I will be here through next week. I'm going to be taking off, I believe, either early Tuesday morning, maybe late Monday night on 9/9 or 9/8. And then, although the event is from 10 a.m. Eastern, which I believe is 9 a.m. here, so it begins.
It is.
10 a.m. on Friday, 9/12. I don't believe that I'm hosting that day, and I'm not speaking that day either. So I should be able to call in from my phone live from D.C. at the final day of the event, and I believe that is going to be the Pentagon discussion.
Oh, don't even get me. So that's another one. There's no way. I don't think a plane ever hit the Pentagon. I think they blew up a bomb from the inside.
I mean, there's a lot of people that have a lot of different thoughts on the Pentagon, whether or not it was something like you said from the inside, whether it was a quote-unquote cruise missile, whether it was a drone with some type of missile, or whether the actual commercial aircraft hit it. All I can tell you is once again, if you watch Loose Change Final Cut, we did the legwork. We went down to D.C. We interviewed people that supposedly witnessed the plane. For instance, Lloyd England, who was the cab driver. If you just type in 9/11 D.C. Freeway, you can see that some of these light poles went down. They were supposedly cut by the wings, which doesn't really make a lot of sense. They would be cut by the wings, yet you wouldn't have massive wing debris, and somehow the plane would still be able to hit its target with the wings probably torn off. But that light pole actually went through Lloyd England's window. You know, he survived, but you know, Lloyd swears he saw that plane. Something really interesting for the conspiracy heads out there, or the people that are just into pop culture. What he still had at the time that we had interviewed him, and this of course was years later, that cab in his yard with the window blown out, and his wife worked for the FBI, and in the back seat, better than that for the conspiracy folks, in the back seat of his car, you can't make this up, he had a book, and it was the late 90s David Icke book, Children of the Matrix, the one where he really explains how it is shape-shifting, interdimensional lizard people that rule over us.
Oh, Well, that's a good time. So, like V, basically. Remember V? Remember that show?
Often when people see right now, like the big thing that they love to use to try to discredit quote unquote conspiracy theorists is they'll try to associate you with flat Earth, right? They'll call you a flat earther or something like that. Back in the day, before the flat Earth thing really took off, it was that you believe in lizard people. And Ike really did bring V home. V, they tried to do a relaunch of V, I think like 2009, 2010. Just didn't hit the same notes that it did in the 80s with all of its cheesy sci-fi wonder.
That scared the hell out of me. I'm not going to lie. V scared the hell out of me when I was a kid. I was like, I was born in 78, so I was a kid, under 10 when that came out. And watching that, that freaked me out so bad.
See, my lizard people, I didn't watch V, but maybe you remember the Sleestacks from Land of the Lost. They weren't shapeshifters like the ones in V, and they were supposedly, time traveled like dinosaur type human lizard people. But V, much more scary because they were coming to take over the Earth.
That's right. That's right. Maybe that's what Greta Thunberg's doing. I don't know. But still trying to figure out how the teenage girl got so famous. And I'm sure you've seen the picture from the 1800s where it looks just like her. Or maybe not.
I have. I'm always, with those type of things, I'm always extremely skeptical and careful. I don't know that I necessarily believe in reincarnation or that type of thing. But I certainly do think there are things out there, for instance, that we do not see with our physical eyes.
Yeah. Yeah. It's always a head scratcher, always a good time, always informational. It is just, I love this. I love doing this. Jason Bermas, thank you so much for your time. We are deep in the weeds with Jason Bermas, brought to you by River City's Reader. And next week, maybe jump into some of this other stuff, some of the more contemporary things, but I'd still love to talk more about 9/11. I know you've got plenty in the Rolodex. Absolutely, and please go check out Fabled Enemies and Loose Change Final Cut over on my YouTube for free and decide for yourself what you think. That's where I watched it, for free. I was like, hey, it's free. Nice. So, all right, man. Well, hey, thanks so much for your time, as always. We'll look forward to next Friday, 9 o'clock. And then the following Friday, you'll be calling live from D.C., so excited about all of that stuff. You stay safe out there. Watch out for guys in jackets and dark glasses. Thanks, Aaron. And that is going to do it, folks. I do want to remind everybody there are no paychecks. I need your support now more than ever. I mentioned Marigold Resources. There they are now as a monthly supporter, $5, $10, $15. It does mean the world to me. Big donors could not do it without you. There are other links down below if you don't want to do the Buy Me a Coffee. I'd also encourage everybody to check out my documentary films for free. Loose Change Final Cut, Fabled Enemies, Invisible Empire, A New World Order to Find, and of course Shade the Motion Picture, because at the end of the day, every day, it's not about left or right, it is always about right and wrong. I absolutely love you guys, and I will see you all on the flip side.